Hello, everyone. Today's topic is how to get future ready in a fast changing world that is driven by digitization and technologies such as generative AI that are making waves in pretty much every industry. And to help me untangle this topic, I'm joined by Tim Callaghan, who is the UK and Ireland Azure CTO for IBM. Hi, Tim.
Hi Bernard, how's it going?
Very good. So lovely to have you with us. Maybe we can start by you giving us your overview of the technology landscape and the business landscape that you are seeing at the moment. Where do some of your clients see huge opportunities? Where do they see challenges? And what are some of the technologies that are driving real transformation in industries?
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, Bernard. It's a huge mixture. I think, if you look at the landscape of all of the different clients and customers, we've got a mixture of, your Fortune 500 type organizations that are, been around for a very long time. Their adoption and usage of technology and how they use it is very different to how some of the startups are using technology, where there's a lot more sort of nimble access to technology.
Mm.
I still think, from a tech perspective, we've all seen a massive influx of all of the kind of interest around generative AI. I think if I think about over the past couple of years, we've had things like blockchain and data and analytics. We've even got quantum coming up on the horizon in terms of the individual use cases. So yeah, I'm seeing in some of the larger sort of, again, Fortune 500 type organizations is, you know, the sort of single use cases. I think it's very hard to adopt technology in very large established organizations, just because of the legacy applications, platforms, and systems, and getting those platforms ready to consume some of the more advanced services is quite is quite a challenge. So what we do see is sort of single point use cases, which are usually quite powerful in some of these organizations, but it's the ability to then go and do it at scale,
Mm.
which is what we're seeing a lot of the larger organizations struggle with at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially I think if you're a startup, you can build the infrastructure, be completely agile in the cloud. Whereas if you're a Fortune 100, 500 company with a big legacy system, that makes it so much more challenging. In terms of technologies, then you talked about AI, you touched on cloud, on blockchain. What are your views on the metaverse and digital twins and 3D, more immersive content? Is this a technology that is on your radar?
It is certainly. I think there's some challenges around at the moment monetization and investment in that for as a services organization. I've been following, well, pre metaverse days when we just used to call it VR. So I think I bought the original Oculus commercial CV1 commercial version one back in the day. So I've been dabbling with metaverse for a long time. I was really happy when Microsoft bought AltSpace VR, which was one of my favorite applications on that platform. So
Mm.
I think, again, the use cases are fantastic. I think at the moment it takes a lot of passion and sort of technology kind of I wouldn't say vision, but a real will for some of these technologies to come to the front. So as a youngster, I've been reading sci-fi novels that talk about headsets and things like that. Ready Player One, those types of movies, right? And you can see potentially what the future is. I still think there's a barrier with the technology. I think wearing the headsets is still quite isolating. In some cases, that's a good thing. But it's not that seamless. Even myself, I can't sit there for 4 hours a day with virtual reality sort of headsets on. I believe there's a new device coming out very, very soon, which I've been tracking for probably the last 3 or 4 years. With Apple hopefully coming out with a device that may start to accelerate the industry. And I think the use cases between, the augmented reality and the mixed reality is where it's really coming in. I've had seen and sort of in the past looked at some of the use cases around HoloLens, especially in the energy industry and things like maintenance on factory lines and wind farms and things like that. I think they're, again, fantastic use cases. And I see everyone get excited about them. But what I don't see after the excitement is that scaling, because it's
Mm,
hard, it's
mm.
difficult to do. And it's not just the headsets, it's everything that sits behind it. It's the exposing the data, exposing the infrastructure, having, the telecoms, things like private 5G, but again, limited use cases. We're not seeing it at scale yet. But I think that's all coming, just takes some time.
And the first technology you mentioned was generative AI, which obviously is with applications like ChatGPT is in everyone's mind at the moment. What are some of the top applications you are seeing? Do you have any clients that are doing some really exciting stuff with it that you can maybe share?
Yeah, so IBM are really heavily involved in AI. I think that's one of the things that sort of differentiates IBM is that if we go back 10, maybe even 15 years, we've been on this AI journey, with the Watson platform, but we've evolved from that, in terms of the consulting side into AI on Microsoft, on Google, on AWS. So we're working in all of those channels, but I think the pedigree that we've been working in the space for a long time is quite powerful. I'm still seeing, generally single point use cases for AI. Again, this AI at scale is that challenging topic. I think in the public domain, where we're seeing the rise of applications like ChatGPT available for public access, that's where we're starting to see similar sort of behaviors like what we saw back in the 90s when web crawlers and search engines came about, the Alta Vistas and the Ask Jeeves, if you remember any of these ones.
Mm,
um, and then obviously, the world landed on Google for search engine, although to be fair, Bing's making a bit of a comeback with the GPT engine built
mm,
into it. um, what I would say is that, from that point of time when publicly accessible search came about, it took quite half a decade, nearly a decade, for that type of technology to land very usable within the enterprise. Enterprise search was something that was talked about for years off the back of web crawling and things like that. And I think what we'll do, although it'll be much more accelerated, I think what we'll see is that there'll be this general public usage of things like ChatGPT. It'll almost, I'd imagine, it'll replace search in some ways, because most people use search engines for research purposes. Um, but I think in terms of the at scale within the enterprise, there'll be a delay effect. And I think, the hype kind of cycle that we're seeing at the moment, it's really reaching the peak. I think it'll die down a little bit, but then the use cases will keep on coming and coming, and then eventually it'll be omnipresent within the enterprise. It'll take a little while to get there.
very good. You've highlighted the challenge of actually applying these technologies at scale. What do you see as the key barriers? What's basically stopping organizations applying these technologies at scale, and what can they do about that?
I think I think if you look at the different layers, right? So AI, from, generating things like large language models, it requires the data. So there's a data layer that sits underneath it, as well as some infrastructure. But then underneath the data layer then sits kind of all the different repositories of APIs, data repositories, different parts of infrastructure, be it hybrid, be it, on different clouds, and in a lot of cases, unstructured, structured data. There's a whole pile of data that can be used at the kind of tip of the spear kind of AI end. But not all of that is necessarily accessible. So, and say, if we look at a lot of the, legacy on-premise applications, and that's not to say that, on-premises is the wrong thing, but it's the accessibility to those data repositories, and then some of them are kind of, even struggling, to maintain those systems. There's a lot of effort sort of put on legacy platforms to just keep the lights on. So there's kind of a funding element as well from there. So I think, what we're seeing a lot of our large clients doing, there's a general shift. It's not general, but it's quite a large shift towards cloud compute. And I think there are a lot of advantages with sort of compute and data affinity. Apologies, my screen has just locked. There we go, we're back. A little glitch. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of movement towards cloud. So there's a sort
Mm.
of a data affinity. But then I think, we're starting to see a lot of the integration services really sort of develop. Microsoft have just released a new product called Fabric, which is kind of like end-to-end data ingestion through sort of data cleansing, all of their product platform, plus then some of the AI overlay and then the visualization, which we're all quite excited about because it's kind of an end-to-end solution. But even then, we've still got legacy platforms that may not have modern APIs, modern authentication. There are security sort of implications and things like regulatory and compliance. A lot, where data can reside, what the access is to it. It's a complicated puzzle to unpick, I
Mm.
think. And what we're seeing again with a lot of our clients is that, as I said before, because there's this emphasis of, in a lot of ways, stability and keeping the lights on. There's less talent and less work being done in the kind of further to the right spectrum of technology around, data access and then the AI that sits on top of it. This is why it's difficult to scale, because really what you need underneath is a modern platform that requires very to little no work. So you need things like so maybe even things like AI ops that can sort of do things like auto healing of services, right? And that's not quite there again at scale. All of the monitoring, the management, the security, most of that needs to be as automated as possible. Even just deploying new workloads, in the traditional sense, can have weeks and weeks of lead time, if not sometimes months in some of the more heavily regulated industries. So cloud from a hyperscaler and software defined data center allows our clients to effectively automate a lot of that at scale, to remove the kind of the effort and work and cost there. So actually we can focus more on the kind of integration and then the more advanced workloads. And then obviously there's a lot of technologies and platforms that allow us to do that.
Yeah, I agree. So there are huge challenges on the technology side, there are challenges on the data side, on the regulation side, and on top of this, huge challenges around accessing the talent that you need to do all of this. Challenges around organizational culture to get people ready to use these technologies. And I guess this is where IBM comes in as a partner to those organizations to help them. So do you have any examples of organizations that have done this well and have managed to scale up their technology in a way that highlights that it can be done?
Yeah, I can. So one of the relatively recent engagements was with the UK's National Health Service. So there's around about, if I remember rightly, it's about 1.5 million employees. It's probably the number one employer in the UK. There's a mixture within the NHS, and this is multi-cloud as well. So it included, Azure and AWS. But what had happened there's a mixture of sort of opposing forces happening, where there was consumption of cloud already, but in a lot of ways, some of that had kind of grown sort of organically, slightly unstructured. So there's a bit of a cloud sprawl starting to happen. Plus, as well, there was no real framework for any further workloads that the NHS as a whole wanted to start to move workloads into the cloud. So if every time somebody wanted to potentially consume Azure, be able to move to sort of software defined, there was no real framework to be able to do that. So IBM engaged with NHS and effectively created a landing zone pattern. Landing zone being kind of like a software defined data center structure and governance, that kind of consolidates. So we ended up migrating some of the cloud sprawl into a central framework, provide the framework for future workloads. And at the core of that then is automation, say all of this sort of software defined data center and networking. And in effect, your data center becomes a software product. It's a slightly strange concept, but it's that your data center is just an infrastructure application then, right? So you're effectively going into a software development lifecycle for your infrastructure services because it's now all in code and data. So you follow the same development principles you would do with a normal sort of work and line of business application as you would do with your data center, and that allows this vending machine principle where if X line of business wants to host a workload or migrate a workload, we can create an area carved out for them with it, that bolts onto the kind of core platform, but it's all driven by software rather than. And none of that's totally new, but it's taken large organizations a long time to go from traditional ops to that kind of those kind of working principles. But we've seen more and more of it. It's a vast enabler.
And I guess partnership working is absolutely crucial in this whole space, not only between IBM and your clients, but also between IBM and companies like Microsoft who then provide some of those services. Do you want to share a bit more about how you're working with IBM on that?
Yeah. So Microsoft and IBM. I mean, the history of those two organizations. They're probably two of the longest standing, technology organizations. IBM, I think, if I remember rightly, it's just a touch over 120 years. I think we predate computing. And then, during the 80s, during the MS-DOS days and IBM PC, there's some partnership there. And then, fast forward to the future once we've been through the kind of 90s and early 2000s. I think both organizations were very focused on developing new products, shipping them to clients, but the partnership wasn't necessarily always there because every organization back then was kind of trying to win market share. And there's been massive changes in both Microsoft and IBM in recent history, sort of mid 2010s, where they've really shifted to be actually, let's not try to win the market for every product and every single service. Let's actually work in a massive partnership from both software, hardware, and in our case consulting services. So IBM made a few acquisitions about 3-4 years ago. We bought Red Hat, the leading open source platform that included things like the Linux platform and OpenShift and Ansible. And I think that sort of effectively accelerated the pivot to, here's this product that runs on all clouds, on-prem, it's hybrid, right? We need to work with everybody to be able to, to expand some of that footprint. So Microsoft is a very important part of that. And then again, that's from a consulting perspective, albeit IBM say has the Red Hat in its portfolio. From a consulting perspective, we are purely about what is the right decision for the client, irrespective of some of the products and ISV, the software products that we have. So we work really closely. I mean, Microsoft are a great partnership organization. They have this team called the Global Partnership System, GPS. So we're daily we're working with all those folks, but then on the ground we work with Microsoft's what they call the customer success unit. They're the teams that are usually deployed once a client is invested in the Microsoft technology platform, and we work with them directly to help them sort of not just once they've got past the sale and the investment to consume these services. There's a big job that needs to be done then to make it actually happen. So we're part of that. We also get involved in kind of like the technology pre-sales as well, around helping clients to understand the value of the Microsoft platform with IBM as a consulting organization to help go deliver them. Because I think IBM again have got a pedigree of working with some of the largest, most complex organizations, very trusted brand in terms of the ability to deliver results within very complex organizations that aren't just have technical challenges, but we also have business and governance challenges around delivery.
Very good. And do you have an example that brings the relationship between IBM and Microsoft to life that can illustrate some of the ways you've
Um,
successfully worked together?
yeah, so I mean, there's I think in terms of some of the names, I'll probably not be able to mention some of the direct client names, but you know we're involved across a huge spectrum. So for instance, we've got again, if you think of some of the IBM IP over the years through Watson and a lot of our AI platform, my screen's just gone again. Apologies. It's an enterprise security feature. So if you think about the some of the you know the platforms within AI within IBM, you know we're conjoined with Microsoft. You know we're porting some of our technology to run within the Microsoft ecosystem. So even at the technology level, we've got platforms and products. For instance, IBM's got a asset management suite and PLM software that has effectively run traditionally sort of on-premise workloads. We've now got them sort of natively running on Azure platforms. So technology is a huge push, and we're seeing more of that. So we've got a huge portfolio of the IBM software IP products that run natively on Azure, and obviously Red Hat's one of the big ones. That's a tier one service. It's ingrained within the Azure fabric. But then from a consulting perspective, as I said, we one of the examples there before around sort of in a pre-sales capacity where we've been working with a client to again do similar like we mentioned with the NHS, where we're trying to help a client stop some of the sprawl, but also tee up some of the very large on-premises workloads to migrate to cloud. So we're partway through the journey with the one that I'm talking about. We've just recently engaged, and the focus at the moment is actually just remediating some of the cloud sprawl. And on a daily basis, Microsoft are supporting us with some of their capabilities. They have a team which they call Fast Track. Fast Track is like a team of engineers. Now they're not hands-on, but what they can do is advise and help augment our teams with some skills and latest architecture patterns and such, so we can use those within the program. So there's not a single program, not a single Microsoft delivery within IBM that doesn't touch into Microsoft. It's built into the core. I mean, this is part of my job, because some of our consulting teams don't necessarily know the Microsoft ecosystem, because we're a team that sits to one side. So we help create those relationships into the customer success unit that I mentioned before around the delivery, and and ensuring that we're getting the best, because it's all about doing more with less. When Microsoft have got a wealth of experience in a lot of cases funding as well to help transformation happen. And we make sure that we join all of the dots and tap into all of those resources to make sure that it's both Microsoft and IBM delivering, albeit we'll be, on the hook, accountable for, the transformation programs that we sign up for. It's really imperative that we drive as much sort of investment funding skills from the Microsoft channel into our delivery. And it says that's my team that kind of joins all of that to get the best of both worlds.
Very good. Looking into the future then, what are you most excited about, and what are you maybe most fearful about when it comes to the digitization using these technologies at scale, hopefully?
Yeah, so I mean, I am as equally excited and worried about obviously some of the AI journey.
Hmm.
Albeit I'll still be involved in trying to push this great technology. I think I'm quite excited to start to see the integration of multiple large language models and the sort of journey towards an artificial general AI around. I think there's so much scope when things start to actually integrate that things could quite quickly get very scary in terms of the power of and then when you think about the public has access to these things, but also bad actors also have access to these things as well, right? So I think, I think we also might see a bit of a halt or someone push the brakes a little bit, because I think it's worrying. It's worrying government. It's worrying even top technology leaders. Um, throughout the world. I do think we need to press ahead. I think the power for good and the ability to do more with less, it is essentially a great thing. I think it will upset industries. It's going to potentially, there's been lots of sort of talk around how it will impact, jobs, but it will create more jobs. It's potentially got the power to, almost impact the social fabric of, the world, or, in my case, the United Kingdom. Um, and I'm not entirely sure where it'll take us. So I think that's a little bit scary. I think, but I do believe there's an overwhelming, um, use case for doing good. And maybe, I think when I refer to sort of my sci-fi background, I'm a little bit more Gene Roddenberry than sort of maybe some of the darker sci-fi. So, I do believe that, we can push towards a greater civilization. So I think, yeah, I think as I said, I think we'll push towards good, but I think there's going to be definitely some rocky patches. I mean, it's the same with everything, right? I mean, the internet was a massive explosion. It's been used for good and bad things. Social media is still getting dragged over the coals for its impact. I've got a young child at home that gets impacted by social media, and I worry about that. There's lots and lots of use cases. Is it making the world a better place? In most cases, I think it does, but I think it also comes with some warnings as well. And I think that's where there needs to be tighter governance, not always fully regulated, but some regulation. And I think we'll see that with AI. And then I think I'm still excited about the everyone wearing goggles and things like that, to walk around. And I think the world becomes a very different place when it's augmented with technology. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes. But again, with its pitfalls.
I agree. I couldn't have said any better. I completely agree that I think the technology has amazing promise to solve some of the world's biggest problems around accessibility to education and healthcare, sorting out some inequalities, helping us to tackle climate change. There are huge opportunities there. But as you said, it comes with many challenges that we need to address. I would have loved to carry on talking to you, because this is such a fascinating topic. For now, I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and hopefully we can do this again at some point in the future.
Oh, you're welcome, Bernard. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you.